Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again. Admin, please confirm that this is being streamed.
Yes, please, now go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to yet another evening. My name is Adeshola. I will be your moderator for this evening. I'd like to say thank you. Our facilitator is right here early and ready to take us on our topic for today. Please kindly confirm that we have Edie on the call. Please, party chairpersons, as you're here, kindly speak to your classmates. We have just 17 or less people here. We should be about 40 and above. So please go in and ensure that your members are here. We'll be looking at media in a democracy. This is your 14th class, is the start of this cohort. And I believe that we are all ready to take on today's learnings as we journey through media in a democracy. So I would give another 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, and we will kickstart this at 17:05 on the dot. So please, let's remember our ground rules or housekeeping rules. Once you come in, please place your names in the chat box as you would like to see them at the end of this course during your graduation. Also, place the parties that you represent, the pseudo-political parties that you represent in the Electoral College just beside your names. Thank you very much. See you in a couple of minutes. Okay, It's 17:05 on the dot. And it's at this point, let me see, we're 26th in number. This is including the admins from the college. So we're still expecting quite a number of students. Please remember to nudge your classmates to please come into the class. Okay, they won't want to miss this. All right, so we kick off by introducing our facilitator, and I would like to invite the executive director of the college to please do the kind honors of introducing our facilitator for today. Over to you, sir.
Good day, everyone. It's law, which I'll tell Mr. Dr. Toby, and only an ED can introduce an ED. And since I remain the smaller ED, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Toby Oluwatola. So Dr. Toby Oluwatola is the Executive Director of the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development, CGID, a media innovation think and do tank with a mission to enable a media that promotes the values of democracy in Africa. CGID owns and operates a range of media platforms, including Premium Times, an investigative journalism platform, Dubawa, a fact checker, pressattack.ng, leaks.ng, campusreporter.ng, gosi.app, among others. Dr. Oluwatola started his career in 2006 as a management consultant, but has since worked with as a presidential campaign manager, a policy consultant in 4 continents, and an energy entrepreneur. He is also currently the founder and board chairman of the Madiba Foundation of Good Governance and the founder and CEO of XIII014 Energy. He's an enthusiastic, albeit terrible golfer, which I don't agree with. He's played golf in courses on more than 4 or 5 continents. He's a competitive board and card game player and a happiness hacker. You can ask him offline. I don't know what that means, but it's a pleasure to introduce my friend, my brother, and who I always say will one day be the executive vice president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Dr. Toby Oluwatola. It's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Electoral College, sir.
Thank you very much, Kunle. My golf has improved since I wrote that bio for you guys, so it's about time to update it. My golf has significantly improved, but I'm still I don't consider myself a talented golfer. I'm just someone who works very hard at it. So,
but I think, Toby, I think at this point, the college can comfortably say, that's putting CGID and Electoral College together. We can comfortably call you Dr. Toby Woods. So yeah, our Toby Woods, and we're cool with that.
Thanks a lot, Kunle, for the kind introduction. And it's a pleasure to be with you guys today. First of all, let me say a big appreciation, give my big appreciation to the Electoral College for consistently, time and again, facilitating, hosting this very important platform to educate people who want to get into public life. I think it's a very noble thing that you all are interested in good governance, that you're interested in being politically literate, because it's important for our coexistence as a people. I think it's also extremely commendable that the Electoral College continues to do this and is just consistent in delivering this quality work that they do. This is the 13th cohort, if I'm not mistaken, and it feels like yesterday that the first or second one was happening. So it's testament to the great work that they're doing. Kunle, my brother Kunle Lawal, Lisa, who's the lead of this college, this literacy classes. Thank you so much to you guys. You're doing phenomenal work. I will get on to share my slide real quick. so that you can see the presentation, if I can get it to. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to. Okay, so I'm coming. I think I might need to change something in the system preferences. Okay. 1 second. Okay, I may need to leave the meeting briefly.
Okay, we'll wait a minute for our facilitator to get back in.
Okay, so thank you very much for your patience. Apparently, it's the first time it's happened to me that Zoom required me to leave the meeting before I could get started. I could have that sharing fixed. So, but we can get on with it. So the topic for today is media and democracy. And like Kunle said earlier, I run a media innovation think tank called CJID, Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development. And at CJID, but also more broadly, intellectually, we believe that the media is critical to democracy. As this, and if you leave this session with nothing else, I'd hope that you will leave this session understanding the importance of a free and independent media for a functional democracy to work. As the picture suggests, without the media, democracy falls apart. And you don't have to take that from me. I think you can take it from the words of one of the founders of perhaps the most popular democracy in the world, which is the US democracy, Thomas Jefferson, where he said, where he'd left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government. I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. But I should mean that every man should receive those papers and be capable of reading them. So he made this comment or said this actually, or wrote this rather, at a time when literacy levels were still very low in the United States, and the few people who could read and understand what was going on in the governance of the people, then had outsized power. And the bottom line is we need to know what's going on, and we need platforms that can be used to sort of gather the people and get the people to act collectively in their shared interests. So the point that we're making here, and this is another quote from Nelson Mandela, who arguably is one of the biggest icons of democracy in Africa, and he said that media and journalism require democracy as its only form of government that respects freedom of speech, but at the same time, democracy requires okay, this is not Mandela's words now. This is theory. But at the same time, democracy requires that free flow of information for public discussion and for a watchdog function of an independent state. So what Madiba said is that a critical and independent investigative press is the lifeblood of any democracy. So all these points that we're making really go to the idea that an independent press is a public good. Now, let me explain what I mean by public good. A public good in economics is a a public good in an economics is something that in the official definition of a public good is that it is non-rival and non-excludable, meaning that when everybody needs that thing, everybody needs it, even though they may not realize that they need it. Everybody needs it. And when you have it, you cannot prevent anybody in the community from benefiting from its good value. So that's non-excludable. You cannot deprive everybody from benefiting from its good values. But at the same time, it's also hard for everybody to be providing it, because there are rules and principles around its provision. So that's the non-rival part of things. Now, a very good example of a public good in economics is network industries like, say, telecommunications, or say electricity provision. Now, electricity, you can't have, it's non-rival in the sense that you can't have everybody, every single person drawing electricity lines from the generating station from Kainji Dam all the way to their houses. Even though everybody can have generator in their homes, everybody can have whatever, but it will still be individually more expensive for everybody to have generators in their homes versus us having a shared way that we get electricity to everybody, right? The same thing with telecommunications. You can't just have your own satellite in the sky that beams telecommunications to you. You need to share that resource. So that's a classic definition of a public good. And then the non-excludable is that if there's an electricity line passing in front of my house, you can't remove that electricity line from the front of my house. It automatically means that it's cheaper for me to connect to that line than to connect directly to Kainji Dam or whatever. So I cannot be deprived of it if I want to tap into it. It's hard to deprive me of it. So I can be deprived, but it's hard to deprive me of it. It's the same thing with media and good journalism. Now, the non-rival part of journalism is that there is a process that good media ought to take that tends to be a little, it tends to be beyond what an independent, just an individual typing on Instagram can do, or on Twitter can do. And individual typing on Twitter will have to go through, establish a process, have his reporters, have his editors, have his editorial board, and all those types of things. It's not impossible to do, it's just hard to do. So there is a role that traditional organized media that goes through the proper ethics of media plays in democracy, that is important and is a public good, especially if you are doing the type of journalism where you are trying to hold governments to account or powerful people to account. Then it's not a fancy job, but it's a job that needs to be done anyway. So here, I still getting into a bit of theory, we're arguing that, a modern democracy really brings together three key elements. So there's the individuals and the markets, there is the state, which is the government, and so on and so forth. And then there's the community. And the role of the media is that the media provides a voice. So when the markets are too powerful, and the state and the community are weak, what you have is an oligarchy, a few people controlling the destinies of everybody. When the state is, too powerful and markets and community are weak, you're left with an autocracy. And when community is strong and the state and individual markets are weak, you're left with anarchy. So the idea is the three pillars need to sort of counterbalance each other. And because the state has power in the sense that it controls the guns, it will always have power. It will usually have power. Markets, they control the money. They will mostly have power. The community is the one that is often left powerless in societies that don't have strong media that give it a voice. So it's important that there be strong media that give the community a voice for democracy to work in the right way. Now, here I describe the three jobs that the media does in society or ought to do in a good society. Good media ought to do in a good society. And don't get me wrong, I'm speaking about the ideal role of media. There is all sorts of perversions of the role of media, where the media, because of the existential challenges that it faces, is often forced to become just a PR entity. But in a democracy where the media is playing its rightful role in democracy, these are the things that the media ought to be doing. And one is that it's a watchdog. Keeping states and markets accountable, scrutinizing government officials, providing principled resistance to external forces that want to subvert its autonomy. Then it's a gatekeeper of the public sphere, and this is an important, not very often celebrated role of media, given that, the media, or at least the journalism media, has this role of tackling disinformation, misinformation. Now, if you're on Twitter or you are on any of the social media platforms, you don't even need to be on social media platforms these days. There's any number of now that Sora has come out. I don't know if anybody here has used Sora. Can people indicate by a thumbs up if you've used Sora? Okay. Nobody has used Sora. Okay. So Sora, for those who don't know, Sora is the new Sora is the new AI machine that can generate 60 seconds of video by you just saying the words, just typing a prompt, and it can generate video. And that's the next level, because now, the level of misinformation we're going to have to deal with, is going to be significant. And anybody who has experienced any election anywhere in the world in the last 5 years recognizes, just how important, tackling misinformation is to democracy. Because very easily now, I could easily just manufacture information, or someone saying something and ruin their electoral chances just like that, by getting that information to go viral and stuff like that. So it's important that there be platforms that, if this thing is posted on this platform, we know that they've done the work to verify it. If this thing goes on X platform, they've done the work to make sure that it is true. And people need to have that place that they can go to say, okay, if I'm not sure, I can go to these people and verify what is true or not. And that's a very important responsibility that the journalistic media has, that it needs to lean into and do responsibly. Then there's the agenda setter, which is, really figuring out what is the important issues that government needs to be paying attention to. What are the people saying are their issues, and making sure that that's what governance is about. That's what governance is focused on. That's an important role of the media as well. Now, this is this is not just us, the media, giving ourselves the work. It's the way it embedded in the legal foundations, of society, starting from the UN Declaration of Human Rights to even Nigeria's own constitution. Section 22 talked about the role of media, and even in case law, when Daily Sketch and the National Assembly took Daily Sketch to court, and Tony Momo as well, to court. These have been established in law. So it's not just the media saying that we have a role. It's various laws around the world. People who have tried to understand what democracy, self-governance ought to look like. Have all come to this conclusion, and it's embedded in law. So I already talked about the Nigerian media, the Nigerian constitution, and that's the exact phrasing that the press, radio, television, and other agencies of mass media shall at all times be free to uphold fundamental objectives contained in this chapter and uphold responsibility and accountability of government of the people. What is interesting here, and a debate for right now in the clamor for press freedom or increased press freedom, is that it says that the media shall be free to uphold, but it doesn't shall at all times be free to uphold, but it doesn't in any way say that when the media upholds, the media will be protected for upholding. So what ends up happening, and we'll talk about that later, is it's one thing to say you shall be free to do this, is another thing to protect me when I do it. So that's an interesting thing. And the second section of the Constitution, even though it is in the Constitution, it's also not justiciable in the sense that I can't take you to court on that section of the law, even though, so whatever it says in that section of the Constitution cannot be used to win a case in court, which is perhaps problematic with the Constitution. But just going forward, here we just talk about a bit of the historical context. I won't spend too much time on that. I'll just stress that newspapers emerged in Nigeria around 1859, and television in 1959, the first television station in Africa, and just going forward, obviously the internet came in the 90s, 96. And since then, the internet has changed everything that we know about the media, such that right now, even though we've got a bunch of TV stations, a bunch of radio stations, today the real definition of what the media means is largely going online. And if you can see from this documentation, NCC says that there are about 150 million internet users in Nigeria. I think that number is bigger now, and you see that compared to other countries, Nigerians tend to spend a lot of their time on social media than other countries. So in Nigeria, it's even more. So that I'm looking at the chart on the left-hand side now. Average time spent connected to social networks per day. Nigerians spend more time on social networks than any other country. And active social media users, WhatsApp is about 90 million. Some people don't consider WhatsApp social media, but even if you just consider Facebook, YouTube, and the rest, that number is close to 50 million at this point. This data set needs to be updated. Forgive me, this is a little bit old, but the point is very clear that a lot of people get their news now on some form of connected device. Yes, many people still get their news from TV, but even those of us that get our news from TV, majority of us are watching our channel's news on YouTube, or we're getting our Premium Times News on Twitter or on Instagram, So in the end, it's an evolving, context. So regulatory landscape, we've got these organizations that ostensibly should regulate the media. There's the Nigerian Press Council, the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Advertising Practitioners Council of Nigeria, and the NBC. In the end, some of these tools, and I will talk about it later when I talk about press freedom, is that some of these entities tend to go through seasons of capture and uncapture. So, for example, the NBC, for example, Nigerian Broadcasting Commission, is supposed to regulate broadcast media. And yes, even it's regulating the media, but it's reporting to the Minister for Information, who is government. So if I'm reporting to government and I am supposed to regulate media, who is supposed to keep government accountable, how am I supposed to do that fairly? When I know that my bosses, don't like being criticized. So there are designs in our democracy that are antithetic to the principles for which we have set up entities, and these are the things that we need to work on if we are going to evolve towards a more perfect union, or a more perfect democracy, or a developing a more mature democracy, as the case may be. So I want to use the rest of the time to talk about some of the, the objective of this session really is to do three things. Number one, help us understand the importance of the role of media. Two is to help us to see the challenges that the media faces in accomplishing that role, and what we can do as individuals to support that role of the media. And then finally, I'll give some tips on how to use the media effectively for your own ambitions. Now, I want to get into the second one, which is, the challenges of the media. And I've categorized these challenges into two categories. One is what I call the endogenous challenges, meaning the challenges that are inside the media. The media itself has its own internal challenges. And then I talk about the exogenous challenges, which are the challenges that are external to the media. And if you are a media person, you've probably had to deal with both of these types of challenges in the course of your work. So for the endogenous ones, the first one obviously is ethical and professional lapses. Are we adhering to truth, accuracy, independence, fairness, impartiality, humanity, accountability? And just from a first glance, most of us will agree that majority or a good number of media platforms, don't do that. And a lot of the reason for that, is because of, the ownership of media. A lot of that is, and which brings me to the third one, which talks about weak editorial independence and pluralism. And I'll talk about what I mean by that later. So a lot of media platforms don't do that. Some of it is because the training is not very good, which brings us to the second one, capacity. Training is not very good. People who are coming out of mass communication classes, not being able to do basic things, basic investigative journalism, basic digital reporting, basic even writing in English. So there's a bit of a capacity problem. And there's a bit of a problem around how people are trained, and and quite frankly, the poverty in the country. Everybody's looking for what makes them quick money. So there is that, which is leading to these lapses. Then there is weak editorial independence and pluralism. What do I mean by that? Who are the owners of the media houses? So, for example, if Bola Tinubu owns TVC News and owns The Nation, how likely is The Nation or TVC News to say the truth and be independent when reporting the federal government? How likely are they to be independent? And the answer is that, the likelihood is low, except they have instituted very strong editorial independence processes in place. So, and what does editorial independence mean? Editorial independence means that you have an editorial board that have the final say on what gets published and what doesn't. You have an editorial team that have independence to determine what they will write and what they will not write. Whether or not the ownership is affected, they will write what they will write. And there are very few organizations that have this. Yes, there are organizations that have it, but there are not very many is the points that I'm making. And it takes a very deep understanding of the role of the media in democracy for you to put this in place, which is why, as we are learning political literacy, it's also important for us to know what the role of various things are, such that when a media house writes something, that we don't like, we can see that they are doing it from a place of independence rather than from a place of victimization. And as long as it is truthful, it's accurate, and things like that. So I think that's an important thing. Most organizations don't have it. We should aspire for our organizations to be more independent. Now there's the exogenous ones, and I will take time to, so just speaking to ethics and its centrality, or let me just talk about it from here, and then I'll go get into it a little bit more. So the exogenous ones, one obviously is the new media, the fact that everything is going online. There's a bit of a democratization of information. So there are all sorts of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation going on that we are dealing with. There's the suppression of free press by authoritarian regimes. That's an issue. And then there is the fact that most media companies are broke. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these things later. So to the journalism ethics and centrality, I think the key ethics around journalism are really seeking the truth and reporting it, making sure that you give clear context. And this is something that tends to be missing today, where people, even though you are reporting the truth, you are not giving enough context to allow people make their own interpretations of the action. So context is important. Obviously, factuality is important, and minimizing harm. And on this point of minimizing harm, I'm going to show a scenario and have us debate it a little bit. Then there is respect and courtesy. It's important that journalists be respectful, act independently, and be accountable and transparent. I've spoken to most of these things, so I'll just move on from it. How many people have seen this picture before? Thumbs up if you have. Thumbs up if you have. Or, okay, I see a raised hand. Okay, so this picture obviously is of a child dying of malnutrition and a vulture waiting to eat the child. So this picture was taken by a journalist for the New York Times, a journalist, a South African photographer, called Kevin Carter. And he took the picture in Sudan when the famine was going on in 1993. And apparently, I think the child was trying to get to a UN food center, and the journalist saw the child and took the picture and sold the picture to New York Times. Won a Pulitzer Prize for the picture, but then he faced the very heavy criticism for his conduct. Now, my question to you guys is this: so, the criticism that Kevin faced is that you took a picture of a child that is dying. You are healthy, you've eaten food. Rather than take a picture and profit off the dying of a child, isn't it your job to get that child to a food center rather than profit out of the child's misery? Let's debate this. What should Kevin have done? Can I hear what people have to say? What's the moral thing for Kevin to do? I want to hear voices now. I've been talking for the last few minutes. I want to hear people talk.
Okay, I see some hands raised.
Okay, so help me pick.
Okay, Dr. John Imoke, I see that. I'll ask you to unmute now. Go ahead, sir. I'll ask you to unmute yourself, Dr. John. Okay.
Let's pick someone else.
Okay, because I see only his hand up. Do we have someone else who would like to contribute?
Mohammed Ibrahim.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, sir.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Dr. John, go ahead.
No, sorry, I raised my hand earlier on when you asked who had seen the picture before.
Oh,
I
okay.
see.
Okay, no problem.
So I should
Mohammed
have brought
Ibrahim,
it
you
up.
could go ahead.
All right, thank you.
Mohammed,
Ibrahim.
you can go ahead.
Yeah, okay, good evening.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I've read about this and I've heard my opinions on it. My opinion is, at the moment he took the picture, his job was just to capture the moment and forge ahead. I know people argue against this, but as a media person, your job is not to focus on the issues, you have to present the issues. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mohammed. Eluk Baju or Umoren, whichever one of you wants to speak first.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Yes.
Go ahead.
What I'm concerned about is the man, this particular person that is so apprised by what his business is. His business is just to captivate what is going to make as a fungitive decadence at that particular moment for people to find out what he has just found. You know, people behave, he's a white and, you know, the other boy there lying down is black. What do you expect? That's racism. It is racism. So he's just trying to get a fact checking on that boy, that particular boy. He fact checked him and he saw the situation and he couldn't help it. And he was hoping the sun cannot rise and set to find a help on the boy. So he's making a kind of illusion fused in that day picture. And is an illustration that is found long time ago. We can say that his immense feeling, even the boy then he's not hoping that no one, because at that particular moment there to be first aid for the boy to be helped. He's very hungry. is, I don't know, it's at a stage no one could help him at that academic point, and the white man got into the system. Why? How couldn't he get in? So, but
Thank
he's
you.
trying
Thank
to
you.
trying to
Thank
promote.
you, Mr. Elugbaju. Thank you, Mr. Elugbaju. He's trying to promote the poverty that is happening. Justin Uyore, very
Yeah,
quickly.
thank you. Thank you. Good evening, sir. Good evening, class. My opinion is that Mr. Kelvin was not wrong, because if you consider the work of a journalist, and at the time this photo was taken, I believe that Mr. Kevin was helpless in this situation, and that for him, the only thing he could do is to create an awareness so that the authorities that have the power to do good would come to the aid of the child at this time. But I understand that different environment and different situations call for different actions. So, but for this case, morally speaking, for me, I think Kevin was not wrong. Thank you.
Mr. Umuren Ubokobong, do you still want to talk?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think I'll second what the last speaker said. Most times it's about perception, and from Mr. Kara's angle, he may not even be thinking about bringing it to the people that will take action. For him, it's economic reason. He's a journalist. He needs to present something. He needs to do something. He needs to bring something, that will earn him a living. So it's a picture that is worth thousands of dollars, merely looking at it. So from his angle, it's purely economic. It's just like, and of course, for other people could criticize from the humanities perspective. It's just like when Russia was sanctioned against for invading Ukraine, nobody had to do any deal with them, but India got involved and got their oil from them purely on economic level. It's not like what they did was wrong. It's purely economic.
Okay.
We need to do business with them. We're not involved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I think we are all correct. But hundreds of people contacted the newspaper to ask the fate of the girl. According to Kevin, she recovered enough to resume her trek after the vulture was chased away, and but we don't know whether or not she reached the UN food center where she was trying to get to. But then let's see what happened in the end. So what would you have done in Kevin's shoes? So what happened in the end is that in 1994, Kevin committed suicide after he fell into severe depression, partly due to the reactions he received after the incident. In 2011, the child's father revealed that the child was actually a boy, Kong Unyong, and had been taken care of by the UN Food Aid Station. It's confirmed that Kevin's position that he chased the vulture away. Unyong died 4 years prior, that's 2007, of fevers, according to the family. So it's one thing to know what happened in the end. It's another thing to know what Kevin ought to have done. Now, the criticism that Kevin got for that story led him to a depression, and he killed himself. Now, the question is, Kevin really ethically had a responsibility as a journalist to cover what is happening? Because if we extrapolate from Kevin's perspective, what would you do? We saw a frame of a picture. What if there were 1,000 children like that were equally making that walk to the food center? Will Kevin have carried each one of them to the food center one by one? Was that what you were expecting to do? Should he have looked at the mass of children that are trying to walk there and say, okay, let me pick which one is likely to, what doctors do when you go to a hospital when there's an accident, and you rush everybody to the hospital. Doctors do what they call triage, and they pick the people who are likely to survive with some help and focus on those people first and leave some people to die because they don't think that providing the help is going to make a difference. So they leave some people to die. So doctors have to make those quick ethical judgments every now and then. The same way doctors have to make those judgments, a journalist sitting there in the middle of a disaster also has to make a judgment. What is important? Do I carry this one child and get this one child to the UN Food Center? Or do I take a picture that becomes iconic, that can get the whole world to respond to world hunger? It was this picture that led to the We Are the World song. I mean, was it this? No, I think this was before. This was after We Are the World. Sorry, but there were several activities that came after this picture was taken. Where the World was in the 80s. There were several activities that came after this picture was taken that that must have led to several other children getting saved from extreme hunger like Kong because Kevin took this picture. So I stress this to say that oftentimes when journalists do their work, and I'll use an example from our own newsroom, we did a lot of fact-checking during the election. And every time we would fact-check, we would do a fact-check that accuses Peter Obi of lying or his team of saying something that is not completely true. The cyberbullying that the journalists face is so grave. Like, people are just condemning the journalist as if they want to kill the journalist, that if these journalists don't take care of their mental health, they might as well they might as well do like Kevin and go commit suicide. So I think it's important that we recognize this, that even though journalists have a responsibility to act ethically, be factual and whatnot, as a society, we also have a responsibility to make sure that we don't make, the public sphere too inconducive for them to do that work effectively. And which is where the challenge, just moving forward, the challenge of information disorder. Information disorder, so obviously journalists do the work of fact-checking, they do the work of media literacy, and then they also do the work of, and hopefully where the hope is that we can also get technology companies to play a role in that. And let me just make this point. So there are 3 different types of information. We call what many people call fake news. In the literature, really goes by the name information disorder. And there are 3 types. So there is misinformation. So misinformation is when somebody, my grandmother sent me something that was forwarded to her in a church group, and she doesn't know the difference, right? Whether it's true or not, she's just forwarding it because they say, if you care about your loved ones, forward this thing. Eating banana will give you cancer, forward it, and she forwards it, right? So that's misinformation. She doesn't know. Disinformation, that's the real challenge. That's the one where organized people deliberately create information to misinform. And it's becoming more rampant today. And then there is malinformation. Malinformation is when something is actually true, but then we do it to create harm. So for example, Tiwa Savage's sex tape, it is true. But when we put it out there, when whoever it is that puts it out there, that's truthful information that doesn't belong in the public space. But they put it there to hurt her. So that's malinformation. When someone doesn't look too pretty ugly is, there are people who are objectively ugly. And then I go on social media and I say you are ugly. It's true that the person is ugly, but can I just keep it to myself and not put it on social media? Once I put it on social media, the whole world can then start calling the person ugly, and that person can go and kill themselves. That's malinformation. So So, and it's the job of media, it's part of the job of media to help tackle each of these things. But in doing that, we also have a role to protect them, which is why I say that we say that press freedom is a human right, because when we do not allow the press freely do their job, we also make them start to censor themselves and start to decide, okay, I won't talk about this one, I won't talk about that one. 1 second, please. Just 1 second, please. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. Maintenance people in the house, and I'm the only one here. So the when we suppress the press, is not just the person who is the person of the press that we're suppressing, is also the rights of the people who need to hear that information that we are suppressing, right? And right now, there are at least 13 laws that constrain the press in Nigeria. These include things like the Anti-Terrorism Act, the Cyber Crimes Act. So, for example, a guy by the name of Agbajalingo was arrested on this Anti-Terrorism Act and ended up spending 2 years in prison. Is a journalist in Cross River State because he wrote a story that the governor did not like, and also a story about something that some arms purchasing, that some arms deal that he caught wind of, and then he was treated like a terrorist. The Cyber Crimes Act, we've seen several journalists get attacked on the Cyber Crimes Act, and so on and so forth. So there are all sorts of laws, and the thing with press freedom, and I like to stress this last point because it's important. The thing with press freedom or on freedom is that it needs to be in law. When it's not in law, even people like me, the truth is that if you give me power tomorrow, I cannot tell you categorically that I will not try to suppress some press. I cannot tell you that. Because the truth is that the nature of power, okay, thank you. Because the nature of power is that I feel like I'm doing all these good deeds, and then there are these kids who cannot see all the good deeds I'm doing, and it's the one that I'm not doing quite well that they want to make noise about, And the nature of power is that you are always going to be making choices between between degrees of evil. Should I do this very, very bad evil, or should I do this modest evil to prevent this very, very bad evil? So when someone decides to report on that modest evil that I did to prevent a worse evil, I will feel compelled to suppress them. So, because I'm like, why can't you focus on the good that I've done? Why can't you focus on the evil that I avoided? So it's a normal thing. And even people like Martin Luther, if anybody is a student of the Protestant Reformation or of the Enlightenment, Martin Luther was the guy who went and carried the Bible and climbed the steps and really protested against Catholic suppression of free speech and freedom of information. But even he himself, when he had power, he suppressed, some other sects. And the same thing with Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin, the very famous Ben Franklin, the guy, the inventor, was one of the founding fathers of America. When his brother was a newspaper person, and when his brother was arrested, he started the newspaper under a pseudonym and was really one of the proponents of fighting against British monarchy using the platform of the newspaper. But when he himself became powerful, he himself turned around and suppressed the press. The same thing with Lai Mohammed. All of us know Lai Mohammed and whatnot. So the answer, the antidote is not good people. The antidote is law. Making sure that there is no law that people can use to suppress the press, and making sure that the law protects the press when people attempt to suppress it. And that's important, an important piece of advocacy that continues. And then the last one is the idea of the media being broke. And this is a somewhat contentious one, but it's an important point, meaning that if right now, and I'll just give as an example, and forgive me if you are with channels, if you work for Channels Television or whatever, but Channels Television is one of the respected media outlets in this country. And in order to rejig their revenue processes, so obviously they've got they're perhaps the most innovative and successful broadcast TV channels arise between the two, but they're doing very well. But part of their business model, so that they can survive, is that they've gone to some state governments and negotiated and said that, hey, you guys have NTA, whatever it is, or OGTV, or whatever your local TV station is, nobody's watching it. Can Channels TV be your local TV station in this state? And whatever you would have put on a local TV station, we will help you broadcast it in the state, and you pay us to do that. And they've gotten those deals in a bunch of states, because in Nigeria, let's face it, state governments are the ones that have money, right? Governments are the ones who are sharing the money, right? So they've gotten those deals. And then the question is, how likely are they to be objective when that particular state government says something that is wrong, or does something that is wrong? How likely are they to hold that government to account? The likelihood reduces, right? Because they are paying your bills. And it is true for almost any media platform. When 234 Next, perhaps the biggest investigative newsroom of their time, they wrote a story about Desani, and the next thing you know, government tells all telecoms and banks to stop advertising with them, and before you know what, they're dead. But fortunately, since then, other newspapers have come around, and because there's a lot of grants funding, now newspapers can survive because they get grant funding. But even so, you're getting grant funding. How free are you to speak against the people who are providing you the grant funding? How free are you to speak against the people who are advertising with you? So there is and that is worsened by the fact that these technology platforms now control everything. And if you ask just this week, Vice Media announced that they were going to shut down their own website and only produce content for YouTube and technology platforms. Now, with Vice Media going to, and that's because they realized that, hey, we make more money from YouTube than we do from our platform. Nobody goes to our platform again. YouTube has become the town square where everybody goes for their information. Social media platforms have become the town square where everybody goes for their information. We are going to just stay there. That's where the people are. And we won't waste time going to where the people are not. The people are on the platform. So we'll stay on the platforms. But then, what then happens when the platforms do what so when Amazon first came to say they would do books, right? They first came and said, oh, we will help sell books. And they did deals with publishers and they started selling the books. But once they had the market power, what did they do? They turned around and then cut the revenues of publishers to almost zero. And Amazon takes all the revenues and killed several publishers that way. The only publishers that survived are the ones who struck private deals with Amazon. So that is a very likely fate of news media with YouTube and all the other platforms, Spotify and the rest, because these guys have all the market power, they control everything, except government comes and enforces certain bargaining codes, which is what is happening in places like Canada right now, and is happening in Australia right now, where governments are saying that this thing called journalism media is a public good. The fact that it is on your platform, you are benefiting from it being on your platform. So right now, Wall Street Journal, New York Times has banned ChatGPT or any of these other platforms from crawling their websites, from using content from their websites. Because all these tech platforms, they use the content of New York Times, of newspapers, to train their algorithms, but they don't share revenues with the people who produce the data. They don't share revenues. They don't share copyright. They don't pay for copyright. They don't pay for licensing, and they then make profits off it and make it such that people don't go to New York Times to pay for content. So there is clearly a business model for journalism and media that is broken because of the technology business models. And it's going to be important for all parties to come together and negotiate, because it is important that for democracy and for people's protection, that media thrives. Otherwise, only Shirley Poppy and Bobrisky will be giving you the news that you get, because they are the ones who have YouTube following and YouTube subscribers, rather than the people who actually do the work of making sure that they share the truth. So that's where I will end my conversation about the role of media, in democracy. The last part is really just talking about tips for working with media and influencers. So I think the key thing, and many of us already know this, it's important to develop relationships. If you are going to go into politics, develop relationships with key editors, reporters, and bloggers. And as with every other relationship, you have to build it before you need it. So whether it is by contributing to their content online, by making sure that you attend their events and just keeping in touch, it's important to build those relationships. It's important to understand what is newsworthy and be willing to share information that people may need to do their jobs as news people. When you do that, often you become their friend. If they need you as a contact to do an interview, respond to calls quickly. If there's a bad news about you, respond to it very quickly and move on. It's important to provide reporters with information in a format they can use. Many people will send things for us to publish, and I look at it and I go like, there's no format in which I will publish this if you are not paying me. So it's important to provide information in format that they can use. So say, for example, you want to write an article, write it in such a way that it reads like a story, like an article. If you want to put out an opinion piece, write it in such a way that it reads like a good story as opposed to propaganda. If you want to put out a press release, or you want someone to come report your thing, don't write it like a praise for somebody. Write it like a solution story, such that by the time I get it, it's not an advertisement. It's something I can use. And then the last one is provide solution stories. Solution stories really are, things that someone can look at, even though it is showing a good that has been done, because journalism is not just about pointing out when bad has been done. We also need to point out when good has been done. But when we point out when good has been done, we want to point out what is the response, what is the evidence, what are the insights that are reproducible, and what are the limitations of that solution. We don't want to just sing praises. We want to give people a full picture. So if you are able to craft whatever it is you're sharing, in that light, then I will get it and I won't even think about it. I'll just post it, right? So it's important we also provide people in information in a format that they can use, because ultimately people are lazy. They won't do the work for you. So if you don't give it to them in a way that they can just use it easily, you probably won't be able to get it published. Or except, of course, you're willing to pay handsomely for things to go up. And even so, even if you've done it in a format that they like, and all, they may still need you to pay, because obviously they have to pay the bills. But at least it reduces the chances that they will ask you to pay if you've done your work properly. So I will leave it here and solicit questions and comments if there are any. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. And now we will take questions. If you have a question, please kindly indicate by raising up your hands, and I'll call you up to speak. Okay, Mohammed Ibrahim, is this the former hand or are these new hands? Okay, if they're new hands, let me start with Mohammed Ibrahim. Admin, could you please help us unmute? And then Edubaju, Mitch, and Yuri, Justin, Agogo. I'm hoping that these are new hands because I had told you all to, I had lowered your hands initially. Okay. Mohammed, please go ahead if you have a question.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. To the facilitator, you said some of the ethics is to minimize harm. So how much truth is too much truth? Because since it's true, like you said, malinformation, what I'm saying is true. However, the reason I'm saying it is to cause harm. So how much truth is too much? That it becomes harmful. Thank you.
No, that's a very good question. That's a very good question, and this is why you have editorial teams to debate things like this. This is why you have editorial teams in place and an editorial board to debate, because there's no clear there's no clear metric on which to determine what is egregious truth and what is too much truth, right? There is no clear metric. It has to be the judgment of an editorial team, which is why it's important that people of proven integrity and humanity be appointed to editorial boards and whatnot. But there are some red lines. So the red lines are things like, if you are going to write stuff about a child, please look at what UN Declaration of Human Rights says about the rights of children. You can't be exposing the name of a child. You can't be exposing the identity of a minor. You can't even interview a child without the consent of their guardian and things like that. So there is a limit to which you can do that. There's a limit to which also, if you look at things around articles around what they call it now, personal data, and the extent to which we can use people's personal data. There are laws around GDPR and NDPR, Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, that say to the extent to which we can use people's personal data when they have not given us consent to use it. But if there is stuff that is public data, like, for example, a politician is entrusted with public money, that is fair game because it's public information, is not private data. You cannot use the private data of a company. If it's a publicly listed company, then their data is fair game because their data ought to be out there in the public anyway. If it's a private company that has received shares from external parties, their data is public in any case, because they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, and their shareholders deserve to know. So it's really using good judgment, but also the law. What is the law about what information can be used and what information is harmful? Now, there's a lot of sensitivity around conflicts when there is a so Premium Times once published a video of someone of a kidnapped victim getting beheaded. But we republished it because someone else had published it somewhere. And the family reached out and they were very, very upset, and we had to take it down. Because it's been on our platform is traumatic for the members of the family, even though it is elsewhere online already. Us republishing it was traumatic for the family. So we had to quickly take it down and apologize. It's also thinking through things like that. How will it affect the victims? How will this information being public affect the victims? There's a lot of judgment to it. But there's also things that are red lines because they are in the law. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we take the next question. Mitch.
I think on that point, let me make one last point, because I think this is interesting. So there's a case we are dealing with now where a journalist in, I won't mention the state, one of the states, so that I can anonymize it a little bit, wrote a story about corruption, wrote a story about people in Hajj camp being treated badly, bad conditions in a Hajj camp. Now, he then said that, those bad conditions were because that there had been resources. So he wrote about bad conditions, but I don't think he personally identified that the head of the Hajj camp had misappropriated resources. Or even if he did, he didn't suggest that the head of the Hajj camp, he didn't have evidence to show that. He just had evidence that this amount of allocation went to the Hajj camp. He didn't have evidence to say whether or not the head of the Hajj camp misappropriated those resources to lead to the Hajj camp being in the condition that it was. And it's been sued for defamation because the head of the Hajj camp says that, hey, you don't have evidence that I misappropriated money. Why are you saying that the Hajj camp is bad? Now, this is a clear case of, on the one hand, he as a journalist ought to have been careful in his phrasing of accusing the Hajj authorities of mismanagement, because he doesn't have clear evidence. The evidence he has is the evidence that the place is bad, that the place is decrepit and people are living in bad conditions. Just report the one that you see. But now that he has extended it to say there's possible corruption when he doesn't have evidence of corruption, he is being tried to court and he cannot defend himself. And now he may have to face the consequences. And this is what we mean by press being protected, because this is a case where it's really just, okay, you take down the story, you didn't, he shouldn't have to go to jail or pay a heavy fine for that. Otherwise, people now start to censor themselves and the press are not able to do their job. So it's a fine line. I just thought I'd throw that in.
Okay. I've asked you to unmute. Let's take the second question.
Yeah. Hi, appease everyone. Thank you so much, facilitator. Please, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, please go ahead. We
Yes,
can hear
yes.
you.
Okay. Without fear or favor, I seem that you could have an addition to this because we are depending on a constitutional authority in this country. And as a matter of a press release, how can you give us a clarity of procedures and extortive public enlightenment to those that blackmail a public video viral on or discriminating the president about what cut and join what he says? You try to join it. Is there a press release to prevent them for doing this? Because they are marking a lot of a deprecations on our public offices. And I think if we could cultivate that, I know that journalism, we have the power of media. I mean, the editorial board. I sometimes work with the editor in chief. I stayed with Professor A.S. Ashaju. They always deliver newspaper to his house every day, every sort of papers. So those things, doesn't happen mostly on newspapers, but viral on our device, YouTube, any kind of ways. So please, can you address that to us? Thank you, sir.
So, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that when malinformation targets public office holders and it also happens to be disinforming, should there be heavy sanctions for the people who propagate such harmful misinformation or disinformation? Okay, so I think that this is a debate that is very much alive in the media as well as in governments around the world where tackling disinformation is concerned. I think that there are people who advocate that, and if you followed the debates around the NITDA code, they were trying to smuggle into it a bit of a disinformation censorship and legal censorship of disinformation. The risk to doing that is that you do that, and then people will then use that if you are a good person in government that did that to sort of tackle, egregious disinformation, someone else may come to government and just say, anything you say that is wrong about me, I'm going to use this law against you. So you have to be careful when you are putting together laws that will potentially sanction free speech. And so you have to be careful. But at the same time, there should definitely be censorship boards. Most of them independent of government that play that role, which is why it is my view that an entity like Nigerian Broadcasting Commission plays an important role, but that role needs to be independent of government. It cannot be reporting to the Minister of Information, because if it's reporting to the Minister of Information, it cannot be independent. So it needs to be such that it is funded by a first line deduction from federal allocation, the same way the legislature is funded, outside of the purview of the executive.
Yes. Those things were done by and suppressed in the secret.
Yeah. So I hear you. And I'm just saying that, and there are many countries in which this is the case. So in most of Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, for example, and it's no surprise that those countries are equally some of the richest countries in the world. The press is funded by the government, but not in a way that the government has control over it. The government
Okay.
has no control over it because the money goes directly. The government cannot control the government of the day cannot control the money going to the press from going to the press. So, but the government is funding it, and then there are independent regulators that can, essentially tackle the press and help self-regulate it. So again, to address your question very pointedly again, we have to be very careful when we advocate for government or some other entity to help us by tackling misinformation. I think these are things that we have to do as citizens ourselves and come up with ways with which we tackle things like this and get government to support it in a way that the government cannot influence it. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. A great response. Thank you, sir. Now I would ask Iyore to unmute himself. You can ask your question now.
All right, thank you. Sir, your response to the last questionnaire partly speaks to my question, but I would like you to expatiate more. Let me explain so that you get a clearer picture. The type of journalism and the established media that we have in Nigeria is part of the problem of Nigeria. I say this because if you followed the 2023 election very closely, you see a lot of sensationalism, you see a lot of bias. In fact, depending on which camp a journalist belongs to, he writes and publishes, even if they are not factual. I remember the lecture we had with Mr. Camry Apollo. He actually alluded to this, that a lot of people, most journalists publish just for the brand envelope. In fact, he gave us a story how he himself was involved in a case where there was supposed to be a brand envelope, stuff like that. Now, if as a journalist, you publish a story about, let's say, Peter Obi, for instance, and that story is not true in the sense that I am with Peter Obi and I have seen what Peter Obi have done. I am not a journalist. Now, Peter Obi now has the right to sue you for, libel. But this information you have published as a journalist is consumed by the critical mass of Nigerians as a public. Now, how do, not Peter Obi this time around, the masses who consume the information that journalist has published, which is not factual, which is not accurate about Peter Obi, how do the masses hold such a journalist accountable outside of the subject of discussion? That's why I said the last response somehow speak to it. So I wanted to expatiate more. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so thank you very much. Are we still there?
Yes.
So thank you very much. I think that citizens already have ample platforms to debate what journalists write. There is Twitter, there is Facebook, there are all sorts of platforms from which we can debate what journalists write. I think the risk, though, is that, and I think what often happens is that in the bid to debate what people have written, people then recourse to cursing people and death threats and things like that. That's never permissible. And I think that it's the responsibility of the tech platforms, according to their own community guidelines, to take down things like that. So the appeal is that, yes, you can debate what people have written, but do it with evidence and do it with civility. So that's important. But at the same time, I also think that there should be platforms like the Nigerian Union of Journalists, the National Press Council, the National Broadcasting Commission, who are supposed to be regulators of the free press, who can also weigh in, provided they can weigh in from a place of independence. And that's important. That's important that they can weigh in from a place of independence. To the extent that they are not independent, it makes it difficult for anybody to even believe what they say when they say it. In other countries in other climes where things work, that's what happens. But here, where even the judiciary is sort of questionable, it's hard to find who you can trust. Which is why it's important that we have at least a few media platforms that are independent, because and the way to independence is to also make sure that their finances are somewhat independent. So it's a long journey. We won't get there overnight, because a lot of these media houses, as you rightly identified, they are supported or owned by the politicians that you are talking about. So they will do what the politicians. They will not go against the politicians that support them. So I think that's the journey that we need to go to. The journey where we create independent media that can do accountability journalism, such that if they come against my guy, I know that they have a right, they have justification for coming against my guy. And if they and I know that the next day they will come harder on the other guy, because the other guy is worse. So I don't know. We live in an imperfect democracy, and there's almost no democracy around the world that is perfect. But ours is a little more imperfect than most. So these are things that happen. And yes, brown envelope journalism is everywhere. It definitely is. So I worked on a presidential campaign once, and I know for a fact that close to 80% of what you read in the news is paid for. So I get it. I get where you're coming from.
Yes,
but it still doesn't.
Sorry, sir. I totally agree with you. I agree with you because when I did a comparative analysis of those countries whose anti-corruption is very strong, countries like Denmark, countries like Finland and co. I've come to see that legislation for the established media is the same thing with what Nigeria has. But the difference is that the willpower here, the courage and the character to actually allow press freedom is not here as compared to those countries. That's the difference. Their laws are not different from the laws regulating journalism and media in Nigeria from what I have seen in the textbooks.
Their laws are in many cases different, which is why I say that what we need is a legal legislative advocacy. Their laws are different. And their laws protect the press and provide for independent financing for the press. So I disagree with you on that. Their laws are different. That's why it works. So yes, willpower also is good, but in upholding the law, because there are many times where people disobey the law with impunity, but the law itself needs to be fixed. That's what we are arguing.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay. Maureen, I've asked you to unmute. And then lastly, Oluwakemi.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to say the full independence, the full dependence of the media, especially in the Nigerian system, on the government is a problem for us. It has been well established. But my question is, the presence of laws within a state concerning the press, how powerful is it over that of the international regulation. Reason is this: we look at press freedom in a state and the impediments that could affect free flow of press in a state, and how the government on the outside, that's international regulation, responds to it. In 2018, Jamal Khashoggi was killed in Saudi Arabia. He's a journalist. And then there were no sanctions, there were no penalties, to the best of my knowledge, imposed on Saudi Arabia. Until today, the families of Khashoggi, and of course, protests erupted around the world concerning the killing of the guy. But till today, we've not seen anybody being brought to book. We see press bottlenecks in socialist Russia, communist China, North Korea, and the rest of these tyrant or dictatorial states. How does the international regulation act on this? Is the powers in the state more powerful than that of the international regulators, or the international regulators, they are more powerful than those in the states, and then we're not seeing punishment or sanctions being imposed or thrown about concerning people that are violating? Please, I would like you to throw light on that.
I think you answered your own question. You said that the states, individual states, are more powerful than the collective, because we also have to recognize that, you know, the multilateral institutions that we have today, like the UN, for example, you know, are largely constructs of a unipolar, you know, international order that was led by the U.S. government, U.S. after the Second World War. So there is a sense in which people have come to feel that that what the US or the West wants is what goes through those national orders, those multilateral organizations, and not through justice. And people who make that argument, you know, are not too far from the truth, right? So I think that you are right in saying that there is still, as a people, as a species, we are still getting better at governing ourselves. We're still getting better at living together. In the words of Barack Obama, we're in the journey of, you know, building a more perfect union, and part of it is recognizing the pitfalls of our current, you know, multilateral organizations, and working towards improving them. Yes, you know, the sovereignty of the individual countries will continue to be important, but it's a collective action problem, that when the sovereignty of one country then harms the freedom and sovereignty of another country, there needs to be international legislation or international courts that are unbiased and are equally representative of the interest of everybody, which is not the case right now. Just the constitution of the UN Security Council alone tells you, you know, who has power and who doesn't, you know, and so on and so forth. So I don't think there's a straight answer to your question, because it's a debate that continues. I think there are universal declarations of human rights that, and the African Declaration of Human Rights as well, all of which are embedded the principles of democratic governance and media freedom. The extent to which individual countries practice it and domesticate it, and even within a country, like right now, there's a case in court between Lagos State government and the federal government about the Freedom of Information Act. where Lagos State government is saying that the Freedom of Information Act is not a Lagos State rule, it's a federal rule. So they don't have to obey it. So even within the context of sub-regional government, sub-nationals, there is still debate on press freedom between the national and the state. There are some egregious actions of press suppression that happens at the state level that nobody in federal would try. Some state governors do certain things that nobody in federal can try because they know that they won't get away with it. But at the state level, they do it because they can get away with it. So again, we're still in the process of building a more perfect union, and that means constantly looking at the laws that govern us, constantly looking at these things and rewriting them till we get to a place where both the spirit and the letter of the law is clear on what is right and what is wrong.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Lastly, we'll take Oluwakim.
Hello, good evening.
Can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Oluwakeji. So my question is that if we have an information I want to pass across to your organization, and how can we do that? Based on our activity or like a report?
So I will have to. So I think if you go on the Premium Times website, you will find a link there that for reporting stuff. I think info@premiumtimes.com, or if you send stuff to info@thecgid.org, we will definitely get it, and Premium Times gets it as well. info@premiumtimesng.com as well, we will get it as well. Those are ways you can pass on information. I'm happy to share my work email address, but I can't confirm or deny. I can't guarantee that I will be able to act on information you share when I get it. So my email address is toby@thecgid.org.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Oluwakiji. Sorry about that. All right. So do we have? Okay. Someone is asking about your LinkedIn profile, Dr. Toby.
Just search for Toby Oluwatola, you'll find it.
Okay. All right. I hope you got that. All right. There are no more questions.
First name, last name. First name,
Okay.
last name, Toby Oluwatola.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. At this point, there are no more questions. I'd like to say thank you, sir, for the insightful lecture. I'd like to hand over now to the head of literacy, Lisa.
Thanks to everyone as well. This was a very engaging session.
Yes, it was. Thank you, sir. Lisa.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. This was very insightful as always. Thank you for honoring us with your presence and sharing with us from your wealth of knowledge and experience. Thank you so much. I'm sure the students got a lot of value, so I'll just allow them on mute and say thank you themselves.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir. We really
Thank
enjoy
you,
your
sir. Thank you
lecture,
so
sir.
much.
Thank you,
Doctor.
sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you
God
so
bless
much
you.
for the big several staffs out there and
We love
the
you.
big local authorities
Thank
and
you,
the
sir, for the
international
lectures.
ones.
Much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, everyone. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a good day, everyone. Well done, Chalia, everyone. And well done to all the students. Classes continue next weekend, but expect your assignments within the week. So have a great week, everyone, and good night. Shala, you have the host function. You can end the meeting, please. Thank you.
Okay. All right.